I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to everyone. Present we have Tim Patrikas and Tim Keeney, Selectman. Cassandra Canoyer, Chairman of the Long-Term Recovery Committee. Kim LaFleur, our Operations Director. Guest Ralph Williams. And Bill Meyer from the Board of Finance. First item on the agenda is a Long-Term Recovery Committee update from Chairman Annie Canoyer. Take it away, Ann.
Yeah, so back a while, let's see, maybe in March, I think, maybe it was when we broached all of the recommendations. We really focused on the first and most seemingly the highest priority, which was the Everbridge system, which that recommendation moved forward, and still a work in progress, but people are signing up. I think it's going to.
Do we have any idea what the percentage is of sign-ups?
I thought you sent you an update a while ago, but I think it's.
I remember I asked you, and it was significant.
It
you
was.
know, my concern when we launched it was we'd have 50 people sign up.
No, we're
but
doing okay.
It's really,
I think, and they're still
yeah.
signing up. They've called me if they can't do it themselves, if they're not comfortable. I do it for them. And so.
In my phone, I get like 520 this morning.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
it's what it's supposed to do.
I like it. I find it very valuable. So.
Yep.
Good. So, so the next thing that we had brought to the table was the stress management and mental health wellness, and that has since we met with Kim a while back at one of our meetings to just talk about the logistics, and that's really where we need. I think there was a general consensus on our recommendations, but just putting those into action is really why I'm here. And so, Kim, you can, I don't know if you want to explain for...
I sent an email out to everybody, and you all have it in your packet, just encouraging people to watch these videos from Karma on stress awareness. And I did it myself, so it was very good, actually, and I learned from it, not to react, and to just step back and listen, So it was a lot of that stuff, especially when we're dealing with customers. And, this is for their family members also. This isn't just for staff.
And also the fire department has.
This is for everybody.
Yeah.
So, but.
Did you get any feedback from the
Well, I
employees?
walked around town hall after I took the test and sent this out, and everybody was like, "Thank you very much." They were grateful. So that there is something out there, and I always send out the Lexington group. They send like a quarterly newsletter, and I send that out to all staff as well. So, and that always encourage, please, if you need help, call us.
Right.
So it's confidential.
And that's wonderful that it's already starting to work. I know that the fire department did also start some of the training.
Yeah.
And so our recommendation was that through the selectman's office, and Kim in particular, that you would manage
this is gonna be an annual thing.
Right, the accountability of having people do that, both staff and volunteers.
We made strong recommendations that people avail themselves of that. We can't force them, as you know, from a legal standpoint, but I think people are receptive to this.
Absolutely, and I told them,
And we're
get
getting
away from your
precipitation
desk
in it, yes.
and to take time to do it while you're here at the office. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the second one was about having a job spec for every job in the community, and having the job spec indicate that in the event of an emergency, that staff may be required to work outside of their normal job classification and responsibilities, so that they could assist in an emergency as necessary, and directed by a supervisor. So that was another.
Yeah, that I didn't get
So
to yet, because I want to
yeah.
work with Todd and Glenn, and talk about where what are people going to be doing? What does that look like? And so that's up and coming. So
Yeah, and I think like a general.
But I totally get it.
A general statement, just so that in a small town, pulling people in an emergency, you don't want somebody to say that's not my job, I've got to go home and feed the kids.
Right.
You know,
No, I
you
don't
need
think
to
that really happens here.
No, I know
anyways,
that.
yeah, so.
And I'm not suggesting it does.
Yeah.
I'm just simply saying that there needs to be, and it might be something that you need to run by, you know, staff attorney,
Mhm.
just to make sure that the language is
Yeah, I get that.
appropriate, and
Mhm.
but you want to make sure that people understand that going in, right?
Yeah.
So these are your job responsibilities, and it includes possibly, you know, being part of the management of an incident.
Yeah,
So-
in the past, we've had a lot of participation and volunteers join these emergencies, but I think what you're saying, Ann, is that we can formalize this. I can send a note from my office in effect saying, hey, you're required to be here to join an emergency.
Yeah.
After hours, we'll ask for volunteers, and people have been more than willing to step up.
Yeah, and I think we found too that when we were meeting with different department heads,
Mhm.
that people just really just stepped up and were doing things. They weren't directed by you or you or you. It was just they saw a need and they just reacted, and it didn't fall under a particular person's job responsibility. They just did it.
Mhm.
And that's all well and good when you have, you know, people that are willing to do that. That's not always going to be the case.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, I think
so-
the basic question
I
here,
get what
first
you're
of all,
saying.
is to what extent do we have job descriptions for
There's
every
job
position?
descriptions for every function here.
Yeah.
We have one for every position.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And does it relate at all to the emergency?
No, that's what we were talking about. I
Right.
mean, we
That's
could-
something we
Because I know in
need
the
to
past-
add.
something we can
Yeah.
add, in
Yeah.
effect, you know.
Past years, we've had people that were asked to show up at the
Yeah.
emergency center, and they said, hey, that's not my job.
Yeah. So we're going
And-
to
and,
address
uh,
that within the job description
Right.
going forward. And,
Yeah,
you
and I
know,
think
update
the
it,
same
so,
statement in
yeah.
every job spec is.
Just keep it
is- Right, keep it brief. I think where you would
Universal.
see more specificity would be in your actual emergency
Right.
plans,
Right.
where people would have a particular role
Right.
in
That's
an
where you're-
incident. Yeah.
And to some extent, you could actually ask for volunteers for
Yeah.
various positions, because I know that
Yeah,
when I
we've
worked at
done that in the
Northeast, when I
past,
worked
and
at
people have
Northeast
been more than
Utilities,
willing
they
to
had a
step
Wires
up.
Down
Yeah.
program that people volunteered for.
That's cool.
Yep. So the next recommendation was having social services work with the selectman's office to put together a directory of services. There are a lot of different services out there that I think a lot of people don't know.
Mhm.
And I know we direct people to 211 and
Yep.
you know, various things when people actually call and reach out. But for the information to be in one
Centralized. point, yeah.
centralized spot where people could see it, whether it's on the, you know, the website or it's part of Summers Connect. We thought that we could put, you know, something in the newcomers packet that goes out to newly new
Hi.
residents that
Yes.
move into town. So we just thought that that would really be helpful both to the residents and business owners as well. Like I think that there's some, you know, I think businesses right now in this current incident, you know, situation we're dealing with, they have their own special needs as it relates to, you know, running a business and being able to survive, you know, and so I mean, there's just a million services out there that a lot of people don't know about, and they don't know they need it until they need it, right? I mean, the whole eviction, you know, protection has gone away now, and there's people that are in need for those services, you know, energy assistance, and all that could be made by a phone call. But again, not everything falls through the Department of Social Services. There are other services that are out there that from, you know, that we could just kind of bring together. So there would be one, you know, directory of that.
I have half of that packet ready. but
Yeah.
I don't have it all ready, but it's.
That's something that we
that's a
discussed
work
in the
in
committee,
progress.
that we had our social services
Yeah.
director there.
Right, yeah.
What was the response from her?
Well, I think that she feels like it's a really good idea, and I
Absolutely.
think too, it saves people from even having to make the phone call if they have, right? If they have a
Ready
document
access.
or a
Right.
tab that they
Yes.
could go on the website that,
Phone numbers.
yeah, because sometimes it's hard to,
Right.
you know,
No, I
to make
know.
those phone calls, and you just want to be able to have the information and
That's an example. That's a good point, because we're expanding our services in social services.
Mhm.
We're adding session in terms of assistance for some of these school kids, et cetera.
Right.
And that's going to be set up in a separate office over at QB Folder.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
brand new, so I think it's a good idea to put it together in some sort of directory.
Mhm.
People can access whether they need food services or assistance or.
Yeah, I know for a
assistance.
good example, in Enfield, they have an assistance through the St. Bernard's Church
Right.
that provides housing for up to 2 or 3 evenings at a local hotel
Mhm.
through the church, and that's available for homeless people.
Wow.
So that's something that
Wow.
would be,
Wow.
Is that a phone?
Yeah,
Sounds like
church
somebody's phone, yeah.
social services related to other.
Mine doesn't play that. So yeah, so I
So
think
I'm
that
working with
there's-
Allison.
Yeah, that's great. Our next topic that we had talked about, and this may already be in motion or.
It is.
Yeah, so
It is.
just, we felt that department heads, that they all should be submitting monthly reports to the first selectman's office. I think it's very important for people to memorialize all that they do
Yeah.
in
For budget
a month's
reasons
time.
too.
For
So-
budget reasons, for, assistance down the road, like if you were ever to look for state or federal funding, for you to
Grant
show
requests.
what you're doing and where the needs are.
Mhm.
It makes it very easy to culminate that information at the end of the year and put year-end reports together. But if you try and go back and say, I think it was like in March that I
No,
needed
I
this,
know,
that, and
I
the
know.
other.
So-
I think it's just a really good tool to be able to
We get it from
show.
3
Well,
departments
we have
right now.
detailed reports.
However, we're.
Department of Public Works,
Yeah.
It would also-
fire, but also, but we need to expand that to the other departments.
Well, it's new
It would
to
also
some
help
others,
with
so
performance.
it's
Right.
getting the material.
it would also help with
What is gonna-
performance review at the end of the
Yeah.
year.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's where it
That
comes in
is,
really
yeah, it
handy.
definitely is, it helps with accountability,
It
for
does.
sure. And I think too, that could be however you guys want it. I mean, if you're looking for particular information, do you care that they go to a weekly meeting? Like, probably not, but you want some tangible,
Yeah.
bullets that.
Accomplishments.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
some,
So we have a few newcomers that are just kind of gathering all that stuff still, so it's very
Yeah.
new to them. So that was, we haven't received those things
Mhm.
yet, but they're wrapping their heads around it, so our
Okay.
directors. So.
Oh, I get it.
Yep.
The next recommendation was, we have Dave Marty was coordinating, updating the business directory that the town has. It is very old, I wanna say maybe
It's old.
8 or 9 years old. I think, and it sounds like an easy task, and after speaking with Ann Logan about people registering their businesses, and some people register them, some people don't register them, some, they, go in and out of business so quickly, and they don't change their status within the town if they were registered. So it's not easy to keep a good solid database, but I think there's definite room for improvement where we are currently. We found that there was difficulty reaching out when we were doing surveys for all the unmet needs in the community, to reach out to businesses to ask them what they needed and what, how they were being impacted by COVID. So Dave was starting the updating process. He has relationships with Economic Development Committee, I believe. And so we were just looking for some support from this office so that that can be part of the Economic Committee's charge to keep that as up to date as possible, and however they can do that, because I think it really helps build relationships, with your
Right.
business partners, and having the ability to reach out to them much like you would, the town members during an emergency, I think is really key, because I think there's an ability to kind of, have them feel like they're not being addressed and not being heard if there's no mechanism to reach out to them. So
There'd be an opportunity, too, to give the Economic Development Committee something specific that would be very helpful to the town, because I know that that committee has been
Yeah, it's
kind of in a state of flux the last,
yeah, we've had
You lost your
months.
chair, right? Like,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
it Vicky?
Vicky Carr
Yeah.
left.
So.
Plus, it's been floundering a bit, and also this director
Of course.
is, to my knowledge, I can't remember the last time it was put out.
Yeah,
It was a cost situation.
It was a while ago.
Yeah, last time, I think I was on the committee, David Reed was the chair, his wife was coordinating.
about
the ad
15
sales.
years
Last
ago.
time it was
Probably,
done.
it
Yeah.
was probably a good 6 or 7 years ago at least, yeah. And I don't think the last one ever got done,
No, it didn't.
because they hired a college kid to do the ad sales, they couldn't come up with any revenue, and it was,
Yeah.
I believe it was a $10,000 or $12,000 expense at that time to print it, and it was decided to not move forward,
Yeah.
but that's years.
Didn't we also discuss the possibility of volunteers that could be,
Well, we
targeted
talked
for this?
about having the leadership, I'm trying to think what the name of it is, at the high school, there's a
Right.
class that's run by,
Oh, yeah.
Rotary's
teacher-
involved with
I'm
it?
Yeah.
trying to think what.
Roy, what's Roy's last name?
Slater.
Slater, that's right.
Yeah, so having maybe broach him and see whether or not he might want his students to be a part of putting this together.
It's a good idea.
Uh, you know, it might be a good school project for them to, you know, and it's really kind of knocking on doors or calling
Yeah.
and just saying, you know, we just want to get up-to-date contact information. I don't really think that there's a resource issue if we just stay like on an online basis, right? We don't have to really do something in hard print.
I'm
You know, I
thinking like,
think-
so when I do all the new homeowners in town, I go through the assessor's office because
Mhm.
they have a running list, and they give that to me now. And so it's easy for me now, I can send all these letters out to all these people in town. So I wonder if they probably do the businesses as well.
I think that's Anne's issue, if the business registers, we have it, if they don't,
But it has something to do with the assessor's personal property, and I'm thinking,
that's why we
Yeah,
don't
in
register.
fact,
I'm
that,
thinking, you know,
Yeah.
like there's more detail in their office versus Ann's.
you're right. I
Maybe
think they would have a listing of all the businesses.
Well, I already get it from her now, so I have one that I have to send out now, that,
Yeah.
you know, the letter. So I'm just sending a letter out basically saying, you know, this is, hello, welcome to the town.
Right, yeah.
And this is what we do, and, you know,
Yeah.
we're here to help, and, you know, sign up for Everbridge and all this good stuff, there's lists of things, but anyway, so that's, maybe I can check with that.
Yeah, and
see
I
if we
think,
can-
you know, if you were to pull from a
Kinda
few
target
places
that.
and then kind of have somebody closely manage that and just kind of go through, I mean, how many businesses could there possibly be?
Well, that's
Like,
why-
Well,
for-
I can
for
that's
a
it.
small town,
Right.
right, it's not, I mean, you could just drive down the street and go from one to the next
I'm
and
thinking
do,
the assessor's
you know,
office
the
will have that.
Brooklyn
Yeah.
order.
But then there are lots of businesses that run out of private homes that are not so obvious.
Right, absolutely, I mean, there's that piece of it as well,
Right.
and then again, you know, you can only reach out to the people that register,
Right.
because if they don't wanna register, they obviously don't.
Well, you know, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, so, and then the last recommendation really had to do with emergency management, and this was, just recommending that regular tabletop drills get done, and that, they create a record-keeping form,
Mhm.
that we had previously discussed.
How often?
How, well,
Quarterly,
to,
like,
well, yeah, even quarterly would be fine, but the record keeping during an emergency, just so that different offices that received, phone calls or that helped somebody during COVID, like, I mean, you were in an active emergency,
Mhm.
if you were to have a chronology,
Mhm.
just so, you know, when you're putting together like an after-action report,
Yeah.
you want to gather all of those from all of your different departments
Mhm.
to say, okay, well, this is what I did, and this is who I, you know,
Yeah,
how many
that's a good
people I
point.
assisted, and you put it all together, and you come up with a comprehensive report that you can review and
Good point.
kind of see where there's room for improvement, where there's gaps in services, that kind of thing. And then, in addition to that, we had talked about, and it kind of ties back to having that language in the job spec, but creating an organizational structure or org charts to show who's responsible for what in an emergency, whether
That's
you're
important.
handling, you know, the affected area and you're handling the non-affected areas, and, you know, different staging areas for media or
There are
families or that kind of thing,
there are
depending
very
on-
formal routines for this. There's a
Yes, I
federal
mean, you don't have to
Stafford
reinvent
Act.
the wheel. I'm sure that Glenn has some of this stuff, and maybe he has.
This could
he didn't
require
really
actually expanding his
indicate-
job a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Because these tabletop exercises are
Yeah.
really critical to
We've had
emergencies
participation with the
functioning
state.
correctly once you have one. If you've had an exercise,
Right.
you know who's got which jobs, who reports to whom. You've actually had an actual situation that you've had to plan for and respond to in the exercise.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that there's something planned in October for opening up the shelter Glenn had mentioned. So that's good. I think they're going to kind of go through that whole exercise. And I think, again, as they say in law enforcement, right? So how you train, so shall you fight,
Yeah.
right? So it's one of those things that if you don't practice what to do, if you have to look through a manual to figure out what you have to do in an emergency, that will be detrimental to your response. And so this is just something that you want to put people who are going to be handling emergencies in a position where they know their role and they can practice it and not have to necessarily refer to page 7 to find out what it is, and I make light of that, but it really is important to practice those things.
Of course it is.
And then we also recommended that putting out annually just emergency preparedness information to the town, whether it's in Summers Connect or on the website or whatever.
Yeah,
I think that's really good stuff. Like even I, print up like all these,
Yeah.
these catastrophic events that are happening around
Yeah.
the country. I find myself even looking at the checklists to make sure I've got what we need, and so it's a good tool for people. And I think that unless you're in the midst of like an upcoming incident, people don't really think about it.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people that
Right.
they always think it's going to happen somewhere else.
Of course.
It's amazing how catastrophic this past storm has been to Connecticut.
And it's not just
necessarily
toilet.
in Summers,
It's not
but
just
I mean,
toilet paper that you need either.
right?
A few other things
It-
that were
yeah,
put on the list.
there's
Pretty
a lot
basic.
to think about. So
It's happening again,
Um,
shortages.
Nice job, though. Very nice.
So those are just the final touches on our recommendations, and hopefully those can be implemented at some point if you agree with our thoughts on those. And
I'd like to formally thank you and the rest of the committee for your yeoman work on this thing. We've already
My
started to
pleasure.
implement some of these, but I think just the idea of formalizing this and putting in some sort of practical form where people can respond is
Yeah.
going to be critical.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
Great.
my pleasure.
Right.
I will get out of your way so
Okay.
you
Enjoy
can
your afternoon.
continue.
Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you, Ann.
Jamie.
And Kim, I took a look on the email that you sent with the stats. The opt-ins are 934 for
Hey,
Everbridge.
keep wearing that
okay.
sweater.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
writing
that's
it
really
as
cool.
long as I can. Right.
White Sage is 2588, so
That's good.
good
How
stats.
many, I'm sorry,
934
34.
opt-ins
That's
for
pretty
Everbridge. That's nice. It's probably a third to a quarter of the households in town at least, so that's
we're
nice.
going to keep advertising that thing.
Oh, yeah,
encourage people to say.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, the next item on the agenda are boards and commissions, and I have 2. Della Forman would like to be considered for the Board of Assessment Appeals.
Della who?
Della Forman, F-O-R-M-E-N-T. She is the retired supervisor of assessment and revenue collection for the town of Summers.
Enfield.
Excuse me, it's out of Enfield, and is eminently qualified to serve on this commission.
She's a retired supervisor of what in Enfield?
Assessment and revenue collection for the town of Enfield.
Sounds good. I recommend that we appoint Della Formant to the Board of Assessment Appeals.
Second?
Any additional comment before we vote?
Thank her for stepping forward.
Yeah, I've had a chance to meet her. She's extremely qualified.
Yeah.
Great.
Nice lady.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item, I read a letter from Jan Roy, our Summers Enforcement Officer. At their last meeting, the Planning Commission discuss regular and alternative members, as well as appointing a Planning Commission member to serve on the Conservation Committee. With Greg Genlott's resignation from the Commission, Brad Pelletier has been elected chairman of the Commission. The Commission discussed asking the Board of Selectmen to appoint Pat Pio as a regular member of the Planning Commission and subsequently appoint him as a planning representative to the Conservation Committee.
Make a motion that we appoint Brad Pio,
No, Pat Pio.
Pat Pio to the Planning Commission and as a representative to the Conservation Commission.
Second.
Okay, any additional discussion before we vote?
Thanks to Brad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brad
Huh?
is.
That's
Thanks to
great.
Pat.
Oh,
Brad
yeah,
on
right.
that. Yep.
Yeah, I
Nice.
finally said to
Have a
Brad,
full
you gotta get
committee.
back into the game, so Brad's
Good
been
to
really
hear.
good, he served on the
Yeah,
ad hoc
excellent.
committee for
Yeah.
The mill.
Yep.
the mill too, so. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of Hillsdale.
Hillsdale.
Just kind of recapitulate here. In April, I sent a letter to the Hillsdale. And if you have one shot, I will briefly read to you. Sent to Robert Norton, Vice President and General Counsel, and to Michael Harmer, Chief Staff Officer at Hillsdale. Dear Bob and Mike, I wanted to drop you a note to thank the both of you for the dedicated and time-consuming efforts you exerted on behalf of Hillsdale to ensure that the S. Presley Blake Estate is preserved as one of the most beautiful properties in Summers. I recognize and appreciate the patience and dedication that Hillsdale exerted to ensure that our collective individual objectives for the property were met. With the passing of Presley Blake and the attainment of the special use permit from the Summers Zoning Commission, we are excited that Hillsdale College Blake Center for Faith and Freedom will be our new neighbor and a significant contributor to our wonderful community. During the months of discussion and deliberation before the Zoning Commission, one of the issues of concern raised by the citizens was the potential loss of tax revenue to the town, given Hillsdale's current religious exemption. The many public and private comments made during these hearings indicated that Hillsdale, quote, wanted to be a good neighbor, and they wanted to make the town whole regarding the loss of tax revenue, unquote. I would appreciate if you could provide further detail regarding Hillsdale's future plans in this regard. Thank you again for responding to the many concerns and issues raised during these proceedings, and we extend our warm welcome to Hillsdale. That was sent in April, and Mr. Norton replied in August 18th. Excuse me, I'll take that back. He replied on July the 8th. And I'll just summarize the one paragraph. Mr. Blake's estate has not yet been finalized. In conversations with Helen Blake, I was informed that this should take approximately 9 more months. Once all the affairs have been put in order, we anticipate receiving an endowment gift from Mrs. Blake. I had very early discussions with her. It sounds as though the gift may be made in installments over many years to come. However, it does not seem premature for us to begin discussing an additional gift that the Blakes, working through the college, would make to Summers. I then responded to Mr. Norton and basically gave him an indication, which has since been revised, of the potential tax loss to the town. I think, Tim, you were in touch with Lisa
I was.
Madden, and basically she responded. The original information I sent to Mr. Norton was there would be $100,207 per year loss in tax revenue, but that was based upon the 2018 grant list.
Why did you use that, and why didn't we discuss this before you wrote the letter?
I used it because I got the information from Walter Topliff, and he basically took 2018 as opposed to 2019.
And
The
there's
second
also a
part is that,
2020 grand list too,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
the up-to-date information is $126,160 annual tax
Correct.
loss.
Right. It's
Correct.
that versus 103,831 that
That's
you
correct.
had in your letter.
That's correct.
And
So it was a timing issue to answer your question, Tim.
well, I guess the question is, I thought we were going to discuss this before you responded. I thought that was the whole idea, and we didn't discuss it that one day because I didn't realize that you had sent me a few hours before the meeting the information I was looking for that wasn't available.
Well, actually, that information was sent out sufficiently in not a couple hours before the meeting.
Well, it was, but Tim had claimed, Tim didn't receive it, and the hard copy came out just
Right.
a couple hours before. So
Right.
I would agree with Tim on that we hadn't had a chance to discuss it as a board before we replied
So
out.
what's on the table here is what do we want to do and how do we want to respond to Mr. Norton and the Hillsdale? They have yet to basically come back and give us any commitment in terms of a potential tax loss. The latest information from Mr. Norton is that we won't have that for at least 9 to 10 months.
Yeah, and honestly, that's
So
why
that's kind of where it
I was
is.
hoping we could bring that up for discussion, because
Right.
I would agree they need time to settle the affairs.
Right.
But there will be a change in administration. We just want to make
Correct.
sure that we have some method to make sure that we follow back up in March or April and, see what's going on. I mean, they've made no formal commitment, so there's no real
Right.
dog to chase here. The other question that I had, though, on the correspondence, the two letters you referenced, Bud, in between that, Jen Roy had sent a notice to Hillsdale about the event that happened on,
Correct.
I can get the date, on May 25th, I guess.
They had a fundraising event.
Right. And then we had a response from Hillsdale's attorney that said
From George Sherbert.
it was not an event, it was something else. But then in this letter that you just referenced, Bud, it says that it was an event. It was an event. And for the purposes of establishing good relationships, I took a look at Jen's special use permit. I could not find online the reference that zoning makes to the section of our zoning ordinance that would be applicable. And let me look it up here.
She wrote a letter, is that right?
She did, yeah. To notify Hillsdale that they
Who'd
were.
the letter go to?
That went to Hillsdale College, 33 East College Street in
Mhm.
Hillsdale, regarding 732 Hall Hill Road. So she sent it saying, I think it's out of order with what's on the special use permit. So the special use permit from zoning says, zoning regulations reference 214-98B parentheses 3. I can't find that. And when you go online and look at the zoning, when you
Okay.
go online and look at the zoning references, religious, it says pursuant to the operation of a religious institution in residential A zone, right? Religious institution doesn't show up in the index. Churches does. When you click on churches, it says operation of adult establishment. So what I would like to do is see if this board could take action to make sure that that's a correct reference, so that Hillsdale and Summers know what's been referenced in the special use permit.
That would be helpful.
There seems to be a little bit of a discussion between Hillsdale's attorney and our zoning office as to whether or not this was the event that's allowed under the zoning. So if we're going to talk to Hillsdale about good neighbors, we should make sure that we and they are both clear on what constitutes an event, what doesn't, what reference we're going to use, because they're not going away. They've been deeded a beautiful piece of property, and it's looking great. The question is, can we get some offset to tax loss through the generosity of the continuity of the Blakes, and can we make sure that we've got nice ground rules for the residents that abut, the residents who are going to get used for it, the guests that might come in, and the college itself as the owner and steward of the property, so that we're clear and don't get ourselves into a legal
Let me
wrestling
get
with
the
those
latest zoning rewrite. We can look at that.
You can do that, but wait. That's probably a task after the meeting, so we don't dilute from the
All right.
meeting. What's available to the public through the town website has no match to what's been referenced here by our zoning office, and I don't think that's fair to Hillsdale
Yeah,
or the residents.
I
or
guess the
anybody
question
else.
I'm asking, what's available on the town website is the latest zoning update in terms of the regulations.
Great action item to take from this meeting. If you
Yeah.
could check on
Yeah,
that.
see,
Let us
that's
know in
what
a
I
couple
don't know.
weeks.
And what was the reference number you gave there? Was it 2-something?
214.
See, I think that's a
dash-
reference to the old.
No, 214 is the 214's there. you can't get past the -9, and this is 214-98, capital B, open parentheses 3, close parentheses, and it's on the zoning commission legal notice that's dated, I guess, March 9.
On her, okay.
This
Then
is
it
on
isn't.
ours, and it's referenced in Jen's letter dated May 25th, 2021.
So the bottom line is, it needs to be clarified, it needs to be understood
I think
what
we
it
gotta be
is,
fair
what
to-
it means.
Yeah, we got to be fair to to Hillsdale as a property owner here in Summers, to the abutters, and to the people in town that are trying to enforce whatever zoning is enforced. And right now, I'd say toss a coin and hope for the best, but you got nothing. So I would just like it cleared up so that when the next administration comes in, the expectations of at least the discussion with Hillsdale about being a good neighbor are on a level playing field. And we don't have an angry mob at town, and we don't have a disenfranchised organization like Hillsdale unhappy with the way the town has maybe helped them get acclimated to the way we want to run the town.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the letter came from George Schobert, and he basically objected to this. So obviously there's confusion in terms of what we said it was versus what they interpreted.
Well, yeah, so Jen sends the letter out to say you might be in violation of the zoning, and it wasn't a cease and desist. It's just
Right.
like, just letting you know. George came back with the letter, said it was an event, and then their letter says it was, and I could see where that could get into an abyss, right?
How you define event.
It's not clear because I can't find the zoning standard of what a religious operation is online. Now, it may exist, but it's not available to the public if I can't find it
Yeah,
online.
I think the bottom line here is that we both want to be good neighbors, and if there's some confusion as to terms of what the interpretation of the zoning regs are applying to events, we should clear that up, no question about it.
Correct, and
I'm
I think...
not looking to be antagonistic.
No, and I think, to Tim's point about discussing it before a letter goes out, I agree that that should be a board's decision and not the decision of one member of the board, because I'm not sure any of us would advocate for sending a bill to them for $108,000 or $128,000 without a discussion first.
Absolutely,
They might
yeah.
turn in to be a very, very generous and giving neighbor, but I'll tell you, if I was them and I got a bill,
No,
or
it wasn't a
any kind
bill.
of- well,
They asked for clarification as to what that number may be.
I think-
That's why we're having this discussion.
but I
right
think as
now.
a board, we might have responded differently than the response that went out, and I
Okay.
think we lost that
Yeah,
opportunity.
and
So I'd like that in the future for whatever board is here. I won't
Okay.
be, but I
A
think
couple of
it's-
additional items here. Number one, the endowment
Thank you.
they're talking about is, it's actually in Presley Blake's will. There is an amount set aside for Hillsdale,
I don't know that.
$25 million. My argument all along has been, hey, they've got money if they want to use it, and it's a
We're
question
talking about
of
Hillsdale.
Hillsdale,
Yeah, of course.
And well, it's not of course actually, because there's some issues that they're very sensitive to, which is setting precedent
Yeah.
with regards to what happens to their properties, and they've got them probably in a dozen different locations around the country. So I think it's incumbent upon the Board of Selectmen, and maybe others to participate as well, come up with some kind of creative way that they could provide financial support in a way that they don't find offensive. And I know you're saying, hey, they said they'd make us whole and all this, but
No,
that means
I-
They
nothing.
didn't say that. They said they'd participate. They never said make you whole.
No,
Yeah.
I know, but that was Bud's letter, I think, wasn't it?
I think what he's saying, and the way I interpret his last comment in his letter, is that we're looking for ways where we can mutually agree upon how we can help the town. I think he's asking for us for recommendations. That would be my.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, either we can make a motion tonight, or it'd probably be better to do after the next administration is in place here in town, but it might be good to establish an advisory panel to Hillsdale so that it's a half step removed from any specific board, right? So it'd be an advisory commission, much like the mill commission was, Tim. It was advisory ultimately. It's the board's decision what they did with the property, but, I mean, I think Tim is probably smarter to wait until after the election to do that, and there's no reason to do it prior to, but it might be good to have an advisory panel put together that would interact with Hillsdale on.
Mr. Norton has said in effect, however, it does not seem premature for us to begin discussing an additional gift. He's looking for some sort of response from the town.
Right, but it's gonna be 9 months from July, right? So
Minimum.
if we waited until November or December to get a commission set up, they could certainly start talking with them, and then if there are any resident issues that pop up, rather than that being falling on someone's desk at town hall, there'd be a board that could kind of intercede and try to balance both,
Yeah,
both
good
the interests
idea.
of the town and the interests of the whole state.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think that's exactly what would be very helpful, rather than just kind of beat the ball around. And
You prefer to wait till after the election
I
to do
do,
that?
yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. The next item on
Thank
the
you for putting that on the agenda.
Yeah. I think it's an opportunity, okay? Like I said before, we want to be good neighbors here. I think their commitment to the town is legitimate. But again, we're out $126,000 over 10 years. That's $1.3 million.
It's out of your control, buddy.
I understand. Just thinking of what's in the best interest of the town. And if they're willing to
The
talk
best
about
interest of
it,
the town is talk with them and see what their
Yeah.
plans are. And to Tim's point, they might have competing interests with precedent setting or other things that we're not at. We're not
And I know there are
privy to.
I know there are a lot of moving pieces here too, as to what comprises the property we're talking about, and whether buildings are there or not there, what land was considered, and rather than just throw these figures around, I mean, I think that the $126,160 is based on the 2020 grand list, correct?
correct.
And
For example, there's the town land, which we sold to them. That's showing $1,800.
yeah, but then there's of course the house that Mrs. Blake lives in right now.
Which is tax.
That's
which they're paying taxes on.
$20,563.94.
And
Where
presumably
taxes
it's
are
life
being
tenancy
paid.
on that, right?
She does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will be paid as long as she's
Yep.
And of course, it's all
Living
predicated
and
upon
using the
building
house.
too. So there are a lot of moving parts.
It is, but the town has some things going on too that might align well with Hillsdale's mission that are different than payments. So for example, I don't know what their stance is on property, but we talked about building out IAPO with some use for town. Well, gee, if they could contribute to that and not set a precedent that's damaging for other properties they have, but we get a benefit and they get a benefit. That's what I'd love some constructive people to think about on that advisory board, so they could broker that kind of stuff and say, hey, I know, Tim, when you and Paul and I sat together years ago when this first started, we talked about possibly funding an ambulance or something, and didn't come through, but there's options that might work for both sides once we more clearly understand what they want to do and how that neighborhood works.
Yeah, for instance, I think that Hillsdale did reach out to the school system, and there was talk about building out where the columns are at the high school, a sort of story that relates to the history of the country.
Mhm.
This is something that's going to be a lot of interest in, and Hillsdale offered to do something, and I think they basically got not particularly interested back from the high school. But that's an example of what you could avoid if you had a group that was more objective,
Correct.
that made recommendations. And by the way, they plan some 15 events in the next year, I've been told.
Well, let's see that.
Symposiums and lectures. No, I'm just
Right,
telling you.
Right, but
It
a
hasn't, the
symposium
word
or
hasn't
lecture
been.
might not be an event the way we've got event listed in the special use permit. I don't know. That's
Well,
why
yeah,
we're,
that's a
having
gr-
some clarity. So
real
that
good
Zoning
question.
Commission,
When
the
you
zoning commission was very specific on the types of events and the numbers of events.
But it says one
What is an
in-
event?
Right.
That's
it says,
correct.
It says one event in 3 years.
Right.
Is it a symposium event? Probably not. That's probably an educational allowance
Right.
in what they've got. But it's unclear. What I don't want is the next administration sitting here with 30 residents coming down from neighboring the college saying this isn't right, with us not being able to define what our anticipated
Right.
expectations were. So I think it's a good day to start working on getting it clear,
Okay.
so they can use the property to its best intentions. And we can support what Blake's wanted to do through that, and we can have a good neighbor. And right now, I don't think we're on a road to that, and I'd like to see if we can get that corrected.
I appreciate your concern. I think you're absolutely right on target. They are building out their parking lot behind Monticello. It's been delayed due to the fact that they've had trouble getting supplies for that.
It's probably
yeah,
underwater, too.
everywhere.
Um,
I know.
And they've got a director who's coming on board on the 7th of September. They finally decided on who they wanted to be the director. He's has 8 children. He's going to buy Hillsdale's going to buy a house for him in town.
So you're in communication directly with Hillsdale then?
I wasn't in direct communication with Hillsdale
Yeah,
to
but
get this
see,
information.
if
But
they've got a director starting in December and we put a panel together that kicks off in January, that might give him a chance to get his family's feet on the ground and might be a good start to a very productive.
right. And they're also going to be hiring some other assistants, some of whom may be town employees, town residents.
Good.
This is the best information I can get
It's good information.
for this meeting.
Nice.
Good. Let's make it work.
Okay, the next item is scheduled payments.
Make a motion that we accept the payments as presented in the amount of $340,160.26.
A couple things on here that might be.
Second it.
So I'll second that
Okay.
motion.
Discussion.
A couple things on here might be of interest. I talked to Brian about some of these things. And for instance, the number 2 item, the AquaTurf irrigation for $93,480 is part of the splash pad. And according to Brian, about half of what we need to spend eventually will have been spent. Let's see, anything else? I understand that also I asked about the Hillman Consulting LLC on page 2, third item down, for $3,305, and I was told that that's an air quality test for the tax office.
Yes.
And there are some, I guess, ongoing issues there about air quality.
There was some concern about that and thought an outdoor, outside a firm committee like that.
Let's see what else there. I guess there was another item on here that relates to the splash pad on page 3. The Permanent Mark LLC halfway down for $3,661.25. Brian seemed to think those were for bricks that people are purchasing as part of the fundraising effort.
Right.
And I asked, to what extent is that fundraising effort ongoing? How do people know about it?
Yeah, I think
It'll be
there was,
ongoing. I mean,
yeah.
it's coming out in Summers Connect.
As
as
we
well.
mentioned in the Summers
Yeah,
Connect, that's what we.
yeah.
I did get my thank you note last week.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
so I was going
good.
to ask, I got mine, did you guys?
I gave her her
Yep.
address, so she was just waiting on that. Anyway.
Any additional discussion?
The only other thing I'll add is that, and Bill, you may be aware of this on Board of Finance, but I asked Brian, there was a Home Depot charge that went through last time, and it looked like a credit card payment. I guess there are town credit cards that we don't see in this payables warrant that get paid outside of this, and I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that,
Not that they were
I mean, theoretically, you can buy something on a credit card, we'll never see it here and approve it, so that might be something worth looking at in the
No.
next few years.
Yeah, I think what they do is somebody requests a credit card, let's say to buy
Yeah, but I thought it
supplies.
was on that. I never really
Yeah.
the detail, but
But like if I went and bought supplies at
wouldn't be on
Staples
there.
today on the town credit card, right, and it gets paid, it's gonna get allocated back to the department I work for, but
Right.
right.
we're not going to see it here as a
Yeah,
payment
good
approval.
point.
The credit cards are apparently being automatically paid,
Oh.
and they're not. We don't have that check and balance
No,
in
I get
place,
it.
so we may want to address that at some point. So
I can't understand why they're not on there.
Yeah, doesn't seem right.
it just it looks weird.
It does.
Like,
And sort of an end
I'm
run.
not sure to what extent
I don't know. That's
there's
not my
that total amount, I don't know.
exactly. Shouldn't we?
I don't know.
Right? What I don't want is a fundraiser and say, hey, why'd you spend $38,000 on a credit card and go,
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
don't know
and
what
is there an amount of money that might tip the balance
Right.
to require that
Right.
it be on the authorization or something
There you
below
go.
that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be.
good point. I didn't know that. Tim.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Sometimes these things pop up from my the things at work, right? So
Yeah.
we pay a credit card.
No, I get that.
We
Absolutely.
reimburse the
What if
employee
it's
for the
fraud
credit
and-
card. They don't pay the whole balance. Next month they get their credit card with the past due balance plus this balance. Like, nah, I'm not paying twice.
Oh, jeez.
There's a lot of stuff that can go on, and it's
Oh,
just not
God.
here for the check and balance
No, I
to what
totally
we
get that.
actually bought. So I just found that out, and I thought I'd share it with you.
Yeah, I'll find out how much is being charged on the so-called town credit card.
And even if we had them listed
Like,
here,
right,
that,
right.
that we're paying Citibank or whoever the card
Right.
issue is, $1,422, at least we could ask.
You say it was
what in
approved.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Good point. I know we had-
Additional discussion on the payments? All in favor?
Aye.
We have amendments for that.
I thought you might.
I forgot to add a couple of things. Tim's gonna address them now. We talked
Okay.
about it.
Here, Kim.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Roll at you.
Thank you.
Next item is the approval of the minutes for
Alright.
8/19.
For the purposes of discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of Thursday, August 19th.
I'll second that motion.
You had some questions, Tim?
Yeah, there just needs to be
There's some amendments.
it's an amendment that there'll be two items added to this. One is details on the FY 2021 transfers, and the second one is the Board of Selectmen minutes, actual minutes from the 5th of August.
The appropriations. So-
Right, appropriations for
So
that.
I'll add those to the website too. So
But
people
just
can address them.
let's clarify that. So it's the appropriations.
Yeah, the
that were mentioned.
130,000, so there's a list,
The
so
100
that list
yeah.
that Brian gave us, I forgot to
Yeah, they
put
should be in there.
attached,
Yep.
so,
Yeah, I asked
and that,
about-
I did
yeah,
the
I
same
asked
thing with
about that,
transfer,
right,
so.
yeah.
I apologize, they'll be added to the
Okay.
website, so
Yeah.
everybody will know what they are, so.
I'll
Right.
amend my motion to approve with pending addendums the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Tough to get
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
good. Thank you, guys.
I'll check on that. You brought up a good point, Tim, regarding how many dollars are being spent outside of payment authorization.
Thank you.
Might be out.